Hi everyone, this activity is going to go through some of these sketch constraints. So we're going to start with a sketch. I'm going to pick the XZ plane or the front plane right here, and we're going to create some lines. And as we create these lines, we're going to pay attention to the little icons that start to show up. So if we notice here, right now I see if I have my cursor down flat along with the shape, we have a horizontal constraint icon. All right, if I bring my cursor vertically, all right, this one's not showing yet, but it probably should. Here we are, we have our perpendicular constraint here. If we bring a cursor across, we have another little perpendicular constraint showing up. All right, we can keep creating. So this shape is specified, my cursor will move through this. This shape is specified within our assignment. If you cannot see that, let me know. All right, but at this point we have something similar to this. So at this point we have mostly perpendicular constraints with this diagonal that has nothing going on. We're gonna create some lines that are now not constrained by changing where we're placing our cursor. So instead of putting a line directly across, we want it to be slightly down at an angle. And if you see, nothing was created here, or there was no constraint created. If I create here, I do want this one to be vertical. I'm just going to create our line over here, a little horizontal one, and I'm actually going to finish it there and drag these two together. All right. With this shape, there's a couple different things that we're going to need. We want to make sure that these two lines are parallel. So we're going to come into our constraints, and we have a lot of them right here. Sorry about the bells. Didn't think about those going off. We'll probably have one more happening. But we have a parallel constraint that we want to add between these two. They're already parallel, so it's going to try and tell you that you have an issue. So this kind of depends on how you place them originally. So since we did vertically, we don't need our parallel constraint here. Okay, we can double check. We should have our angled line here. Okay, it needs to be perpendicular with this little angled line here, is what our page says. So we're going to click our perpendicular constraint. We're going to choose both of our angled lines. Okay, so those are perpendicular to each other. All right, then we have these two actually are probably already there. So if you notice, this horizontal line and the horizontal line over here are both horizontal. It asks for a parallel constraint between the two. These are already parallel. All right, and then we have connecting our endpoints of these two, which we did by dragging, If you wanted to as well, you could do a coincident constraint on the two ends, and this is our current sketch. Okay, at this point, it doesn't need to be any specific size. It's just trying to get some practice using some of those constraints, or at least seeing what they do. But what we're going to do now, we want to make sure that you have the ability to edit some of the sketches you've already done or any of the features you've already used. So if you notice down here in the timeline, we have our sketch down here. We can double click on that, or we could have right clicked to edit. Either way works. Both will get you back into the sketch. So there are a couple extra constraints that it asks us to add in. Some of these, like we had before, some of these may already show depending on how you've created your shape. Okay, so first of all, it says that our line 1 and 9 should always remain parallel. We have these two horizontal constraints. Both are horizontal. We could take a look and see, but this should tell us that it's over constrained. Yes. Okay, so these are both horizontal. We already have that. Then we have our line 6 should be parallel to the x-axis. All right, and our 6 would be this one. All right, so what we can do is we have a couple options here. We can choose parallel and click on our original line and that line. We could have done a horizontal constraint. In this case, we'll just do it that way. All right, then we have lines 5 and 7 should be the same length. That's these two on the sides here. So we need them to be the same length, which would be our equals constraint. So we click on both of those. As you notice, it starts to kind of squish around. These can still be dragged and moved since a lot of these don't have constraints yet. So if yours doesn't look exactly like this, that's okay. That's very normal at this point. All right, and then it says we have lines 3 and 8 align horizontally. All right, so 3 and 8 were, 3 and 8 should be 3 and 9. So these two need to align horizontally. So what we can do is we can choose our horizontal vertical constraint and choose kind of point, we have an error. Well, we'll do collinear instead. So collinear, we'll just do the actual lines versus the points. We can do those two lines. If you notice this one's really tiny now, we can grab our dot and move things around. All right. We are very close to having all of our shape be about how we need it to go. Our final bits, we're gonna need to make this right-hand edge vertically constrained. So we're gonna vertical constraint and click on that edge. And technically, usually I would use a lot of equals constraints. Currently, it has not asked us to do that though. So at this point, we're just gonna add a couple just to make sure. So if we use our equals constraint, our two diagonal lines should be equal to each other. Our two horizontal lines should be equal to each other. These two verticals should stay equal to each other. Oops, oh, you're right. All right, otherwise, I believe we have everything even. So now, as everything moves around, they should all go together. All right. What it asks us to do now, we haven't used construction lines yet. We're going to use a line tool, and we're going to come over to the sketch palette here, and there is a construction line type that we can choose. We're going to choose that, and we're going to come and see the middle. So remember that triangle icon? Bring it down to the middle of that one. I'm going to click construction to pull it off of my cursor, and now we have a kind of midline down the center of our shape. What we want to do now is we do want to constrain this center to the origin. So like I did before, we could drag it, but for practice we can use coincident, where we could click on the end of the line and click on the origin. If for some reason yours doesn't move, you may have created your first line connected to the origin. You might have to delete one of your constraints to be able to do that. If you do have to delete any constraints, you can click on it and then right click and delete, and it'll take it away. Okay, so now, well, technically this is still forced to be horizontal at the moment, but that's how you can get rid of the ones you need to. All right, then we are going to start creating a small circle over on the left-hand side over here. Okay, and what it asks for us to do is that this should be vertically aligned with this little point here. Okay, so there's a couple ways we can make that happen. We can drag it around and at least get it close, and then what we can do is we can use our vertical constraint, horizontal vertical, and click on the dot of that edge and the circle, the center of our circle. And this will align it vertically. All right, and then what it asks for is we need to have it tangent to a horizontal line through the midpoint of line 2. That's going to have us need to use another construction line since this is a little more complex of a area. So what we're going to do a line tool, we're going to grab construction, we're going to click on our middle, just kind of bring our cursor out here and accept it. Okay, so this midline and this circle need to be tangent to each other. So if we come back to our constraints, it's up here, we have tangent, we click on our circle, we click on our line, it scoots to where it needs to be. Like I said before, most of these are still adjustable, so we can still grab and drag these so everything's still inside the pieces that it needs to. If you notice, things do change a lot as we start to grab our shape. You can Control Z to move things around. You can click and drag if it's not constrained. Okay, there are lots of different options for moving things around when they're unconstrained. All right, so what we now want to do is we do want to mirror the circle across this construction line. We're going to choose our mirror tool. Our object is the circle. Our mirror line is the center. We're going to hit OK. So now if we try to move this one, we look at the constraints that were automatically placed. Okay, so it's already keeping equal to our other circle since it is mirrored, but it's also still in line with now the other side, okay, and in line with the center, just like this one is. So a lot of those constraints passed over the line as we did it. All right, to check, what we can do is we can see if these are fully constrained. If I drag these, if you notice, it starts to get kind of crazy. It's not fully constrained yet. There are still things that we could and should add measurements to or other constraints to make sure it is exactly the way we want it to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some dimensional constraints, so some dimensions. So if we hit Dimension tool, I'm just going to start adding some in. I'm going to click on the overall length. This is going to be 100. All right, the overall height for this little piece here is going to be 15. Ooh, this is going to be fun. The radius, or no, diameter of the circles are going to be 5. Okay, we've got this height here is going to be 15. We have this distance across is going to be 20. And then the overall height is going to be 45. So from the bottom, if you click to the top, if you click on that too, we bring our cursor out, we click to drop the number, that's 45. Okay, now, if you notice, as we did this, the lines changed colors. So these used to be blue, and we could drag them around, right? Now, if I try and drag this around, you see what happens? Nothing happens, okay? So this means that it is fully constrained, all right? For this moment, this is most of what we were trying to get done. In class, we'll talk a little bit about design intent, but we want to make sure that things will change correctly when if we ever needed to make any edits. So let's say I wanted to change a couple of these sizes. We're going to change our overall height to 100. And if you see, it's already, I'll try and pop that open again. It's already giving an issue. It's having trouble with what's going on here. Okay, so partially, sometimes it'll tell you when there's an issue with that. Other times you may have to delete certain pieces. But when we're looking at the activity page, when I'll show you in class, we're trying to check for the actual intent. We're trying to change a specific part of it to be the certain height instead of changing the whole deal in the same way. So what we can do, actually, we can delete a couple of these. We can say, all right, let's have this whole thing be 100. If you notice here, we're a lot closer to the design intent that it was asking for, but we still have pieces that are not constrained, and we can add that value in. Okay. Final steps, extruding to 5, and here's our piece. Obviously, if you have questions, please let me know. This is probably going to need to get broken up into smaller videos, but at least for today, it is what it is.